Good evening. Welcome to Live United, Living United, sharing, caring, looking at how we can all make a difference in our communities to bring about health and well-being here. Last week, you had the opportunity to hear from Dr. Marjorie Drapa regarding Impact Monadnock's work in relation to our children and families, and a gap analysis that they had done, which identified some areas that we can come together as a region, as communities, as friends, neighbors, and families to really make a difference in the lives of our children and the folks that are raising them. So I want to thank Dr. Drapa for coming back and joining us again today. Thank you, Marge, for being here. And today we have an opportunity to now take a look at, we've shared this gap analysis work. We're aware of what some of the needs are. And a strategic plan's been put together by community members to really look at, okay, now what do we do about it? So you're going to share right off for the public here, and I want you to stay tuned with us, folks, as Marge walks us through what we can do as a region, as communities, as citizens to make a difference in regards to this issue.
Thanks for having me, Kelly. It's really good to be here. I think the first thing I'd like to talk about before we go to the slides is how powerful community voice and community leadership has been in this process. So, as you know, together with Monadnock United Way, who's our backbone partner, and Spark New Hampshire, which is the Governor's Early Childhood Advisory Council, we really have focused on using a collective impact model to put this strategic plan together. What is collective impact? Well, essentially, it's just a way of rallying a community together around a really significant social challenge. And as we talked about in our last show, the three significant challenges that we're trying to address by investing in early childhood is educational attainment, economic opportunity, and child welfare. And those three social challenges rose to the top because a 2012 needs assessment done by Monadnock United Way and the New Hampshire Charitable Foundation really showed us that this is where our gaps are in the Monadnock region. So by investing in early childhood, by using prevention right at the beginning, we're attempting to tackle those three areas of challenge.
And you emphasize the community voice in this process. And I can't say enough about that, because really without these partners and the engagement of multiple different groups and organizations and citizens, we just couldn't have come up with a plan like this. And that's you're right, it's a powerful voice. It's a needed voice, because this can't be done alone by organizations who are out there.
Well, picture this. For the last 8 months, a group of 33 community members have met in the evening twice a month to hammer out this strategic plan after the gap analysis identified the focus areas that we really needed to work on. There was at one point, I think late in the winter, when it was freezing and there was ice and snow on the roads, and they still came. So I think that shows the power of community. It shows the power of this cause. And it truly has become a movement that the community has rallied around. For me, as a person behind the scenes, along with you and many others, it's actually brought tears to my eyes. There were evenings there where I looked just in awe of the power that this community has, not only to come together, but to tackle something, rolling their sleeves up and getting down to work. And I think the strategic plan is a prime example of this.
So I really want to jump into that, because I want you to have time to share the strategic plan, but then for us to talk about how that's really being implemented and how, more importantly, people that are watching the show can get engaged in being a part of that, because really it's all of us coming together.
Great. So if we look at the first slide, we'll see that this is all about investing in our children, but it's investing in our children for the overall well-being of all of us in the Monadnock region, no matter what age we are. Because if you don't invest in a child, then you're not going to get the adult that you need to help fill those jobs for the 21st century. You're not going to have a productive citizen who's able to go to college and then leap into that 21st century unknown where we know the challenges, particularly around technology, are just waiting for us.
And we have to remember that they're our future parent as well.
Exactly. So if we move to the next slide, I love this picture because it shows how we looked at all children, no matter what their socioeconomic background, where they're from, as far as which town in the Monadnock region, but that this strategic plan is all about investing in all of our children, that's going to result in a better life for all of us. So the first goal came about through the gap analysis, which found that we have lots of gaps in supports and services for our very young children and their families. So our first goal that our steering committee came up with is that families of young children in the Monadnock region need to be able to find the help they need, the services, the supports, and the early education opportunities, because it's all about strengthening families. So we look, much as the Head Start program does, at the whole picture. We're not just looking at the child, but we're looking at the adults in that child's life, the home environment, and indeed the community environment. So if we look at the strategies that will help us achieve that goal, we're looking at how to increase access to quality and affordable childcare. We know from our gap analysis that's a significant issue in our region. We wanted to make sure that our community supports our families, that families with young children feel welcome, whether they're entering a business, whether they're going into a retail store, whether they're going into a childcare facility or a school. They need to be welcomed. And then finally, for home visiting opportunities, how to expand those early intervention supports and services that we know are so badly needed. If we go to the next goal, we'll see that we're really all about how can we better support our parents and our families. And when I talk about parents and families, I'm talking about any adult that has influence in the life of a child, whether it's a foster parent, a child caregiver, a grandparent, many of whom we know are raising children on an increasing basis in our community. So the goal here is that ultimately the Monadnock region supports all our young children and supports their families, advocates for a continuum of services, so there's not gaps in service along the way, but that it's a smooth ride, a smooth transition from birth all the way into the school system and beyond. And I love this, the steering committee came up with this sentence, that the Monadnock region is recognized not just in our state, but beyond our state borders as the best place to raise your family. I mean, how great is that? So some of the strategies that we looked at here is how can we better build an understanding among members in our community that early brain development and paying attention to that is really, really important and gets you the best return on investment. How can we better encourage this type of investment in the early years? How can we help our families have better access to the resources and the help they need? And finally, and this is really important, this is where our businesses came in, how can we better promote family-friendly workplaces? So if you look at our final goal, the gap analysis identified needs and access to services for emotional and social services as a huge gap in our community for the 0 to 5. So our goal is that Monadnock region children and their families who need this help, emotional and behavioral help, can easily and can regularly access that care. So if we look at the strategies around that, we're hoping to work with the System of Care grant, and we can talk about that later, to create a coordinated family-centered care management system for our very young children in our region. We want to better integrate developmental screening and/or surveillance into well child visits in hospital and medical settings. And we want to increase screening for parents who may be identified with depression, because we know that parent depression or adult depression can have a significant impact on a young child, and in particular on a young child's developing brain. So those are the strategies that our community came up with. And if you go to our website, impactmonadnock.org, you'll find that full plan available on our website. You'll find the gap analysis available on our website. And what you'll also find is the activities that our community-led steering committee identified as ways to achieve those strategies and those goals.
So let's talk about some of those activities. So, we have these strategies, we know there's the need. It's always tough for people to sort of figure out, okay, but how am I a part of that? How do I get mobilized? Like, what makes me want to contribute to that and be part of that difference? So let's talk about some of the activities, because I think that's where people can sometimes say, aha, that's me.
Well, one thing that we were very conscious of when we entered this planning process, and when I say we, I'm talking about the community members who led it, is that we didn't want to duplicate or replicate. We wanted to build on what was already happening. So we've identified strategic partnerships that we can build upon, that we can link up with. One of those is the System of Care grant. And Kelly, I know you've been involved in that, so perhaps if you wanted to explain to the community what that is, but that's a vital partnership for us when we're looking at our behavioral health goal.
So the System of Care has been an effort, again, where multiple community groups and citizens have come together to really look at the mental health, the social, emotional well-being of some of our more seriously emotionally disturbed youth in particular. And when we say youth, that encompasses a pretty broad range, because many of those youth become parents. Some are very young, and some are in our school systems already. So really looking at how do we develop a comprehensive plan to really address those needs, much like what you've done with the early childhood piece. But we've been very conscious, I think, both of us being, having the opportunity to work together, of how do we bring these two initiatives together so that they're not working in isolation and that they're really building on each other in this. And, a plan's been submitted to the federal government in this case for funding for the whole Monadnock region to really begin to address this in a bigger way. But that, just like this, has a plan moving to implementation, and we're doing it in partnership.
And it's a beautiful thing to see. So we had a liaison from the System of Care committee sit on our committee, so that we made sure we weren't duplicating, but rather building on our plans together. So one example of that is we know that the System of Care team has identified gaps in services, in particular for 5 and above age-wise. What we're trying to do now is align with that and say, how can we together create an inventory of services, collect data about our needs for our younger children, and equally, how can we transition those children from the 0 to 5 age group into access to services for the older child using the System of Care wraparound approach. Mm-hmm. So it's been a great activity working together, and it's that type of partnership that we're building on each other's strengths and intentionally and purposefully seeking out help and assistance that benefits all our children, again, from birth all the way through to 21 and beyond.
Yeah, I mean, a critical component to this is the screening process that you've talked about. Because if we can screen and find out some of these issues earlier on in a child's life, we're not dealing with it when they're in 10th, 11th, 12th grade, out in our workforce and in the workplace. Mm-hmm. So it becomes, again, important to really start small and to be thinking big, thinking the life through.
We've looked at this economically, and we know that reacting to something, reacting to a problem once it's already been established, is a lot more expensive than preventing that problem in the first place, which is why in our whole plan, and that includes the System of Care, we're talking about prevention. How can we intervene much earlier? So another example of an activity is creating these family-friendly workplaces. And as I mentioned in the last show, the fact that this is community-led has been hugely important, because what's happened is groups of citizens have come together to form these advocacy groups that are aligned with Impact Monadnock's strategic plans, goals, and objectives. And an example of that is the Business Ambassadors of Impact Monadnock. And this is a group of 10 or so business leaders of small, medium, and large companies in our region that came together to say, how can we better support our families, particularly our families with young children? So one of the activities that the business ambassadors are doing, and we invite other businesses to join this activity, is they've created a survey to better understand the challenges that our employees who have families are facing in the workplace, and also to survey their own policies and practices about how family friendly are we. And what are some of the best practices out there that perhaps we could look at using in our workplace? So this survey is going to happen this summer. It's available to anyone who would like to use it in their own workplace. And initially it goes to human resource directors. So if any company would like to be a part of that, we would welcome you with open arms.
And they don't necessarily have to have a human resource director, I would imagine. It just has to have a champion who can say, I'm willing to do this in our work environment. And for the work environment to say, hey, we want to be a part of making a difference in our families' lives. And I think every employer cares about their family and wants to be a part of that, and sometimes can't figure out quite how to do that. And here's an opportunity to maybe learn about some of those best practices policy-wise, to be partnered with others to develop these solutions.
Well, and not only that, but an employee who has a family who is stressing about childcare, for example, or is stressing about something that's happening in the home is a less productive employee. And our business ambassadors also see this as a way to get young families to move to the region. We know that the demographic trends are showing that young people are leaving our region, making it harder for employers to find people to fill those jobs. So we would love to use this as a recruitment and a retention tool as well. So if you have a workplace that is friendly to families, they're more likely to come here and they're more likely to stay here. So it makes economic and financial sense.
It definitely does. And if we look back at that gap analysis, one of the things that I remember is that we're not seeing as many children. So we're not seeing families even. We talk about the out-migration of young people, but we're not seeing even an in-migration of families wanting to raise their children here in our region.
Exactly. And, if we're to grow our region economically, if our whole region's well-being is to continue to thrive, then we need to invest in our families and make sure that they're raising the type of child who can fill that 21st century need by the 21st century employer. So making your workplace more open to family-friendly workplace policies and practices is a great idea, and it makes financial sense for that business. So, we're doing this now. We'd love to have businesses join us in this effort. Our business ambassadors have their own page on our website. So if you go to impactmonadnock.org and you go to the What You Can Do page, you'll see our business ambassadors have their own photo on there, and things that you can do are listed as resources on that website page.
So there's a bit of a challenge out to our community members to really say, hey, I need to do something about this. One of the things I think about is, I know one of the other areas identified was access to child care, and we can talk about what you're doing around early home supports and that access to service. But one of the things, it ties right into economic opportunity. It was identified that our child care workers are some of our most underpaid citizens out there, yet we're asking them to raise our future and be part of raising our future up. And so, we have to think differently about how we prioritize, again, going back to how do we start small and think big moving into the future.
Yes, it's astonishing to me that I think the most important, one of the most important roles that an adult can play is helping a young child grow into the best person that they can be. And in order to do that, we need to invest in those professionals who are taking care of this very precious resource. And so what we looked at in our plan is how we can better support those professionals. And there's a lot of great things happening in the rest of New Hampshire that we can learn from. So to give you an example, up in the North Country in Coos County, my peer is working on, through a community coalition, on how to keep young professionals in the field longer by supporting their professional development through higher education opportunities and financial assistance. Wouldn't that be great if we did something like that here? So not only increasing the wages for our professionals in the field, but helping them go back to school, and then creating those career opportunities for them through higher education. So there's lots of opportunities. We have 3 higher education institutions, and there's great early childhood education programs here in our region. So we need to help our young professionals access those. And even those who've been in the field for a long time, help them get back to school, they want to. So how can we better help them do that?
So we have some activities going on around that. I know one of the other things we talked about was the early home supports. So if you could talk a little bit, and before we jump into that, I was sharing with you before the show started, it's interesting that comes up as a significant gap. And part of that, and it plays into access to service, to the emotional, social well-being, is there hasn't been an investment on the part of our federal level, our state level, in our children and in the people that are supporting those children. It's sort of been an expectation that it's a parent's responsibility, and the world has changed dramatically, and we're all raising our children. And we can't lose sight of that when we see these controversial issues occurring and events happening. These are community events that happen, and we all have a responsibility around the well-being of all of our individuals. And to think that a parent can do that alone anymore, it's very, very difficult because we all have to work. We have to have other support systems out there taking care of things. So, there hasn't been an investment. So how do we get to making sure there's access to service and there's these early home supports? I know the United Way supports 2 early home support programs and several child care agencies, making sure that scholarships are available to families who just can't afford to have their child in a licensed setting.
Well, one of the things, when people come to me and they say, what can I do? One of the first questions I ask them about this question is, do you know who your state rep is? Do you know who your city councilor is? Do you know who your school board members are and the chair of that school board? Make it a mission to find out the names of these people and their phone numbers and their emails. One of the things that we've done with Impact Monadnock is develop a advocacy group. And this is an advocacy group of citizens who want to do something to change the way we invest in our young children. It's parents, it's people like you and I, it's anyone who's interested in being an advocate for a better life for our young children. This advocacy group is open to anybody who's interested in joining. We've been meeting pretty regularly every month, and we'd love to have people come join us. But what we can provide for people is free advocacy training. There's an organization called Every Child Matters, which is a national organization based out of Washington, D.C., and they have a New Hampshire office. And one thing that they do is help people learn how to talk to their legislators, whether it's at the local level, the regional level, or at the state level. Because if you want to have universal pre-K, and if you want to have universal kindergarten, and a full-day kindergarten, then you need to learn how to ask your legislator and your school board member and your city councilor about that. So we can help you do that. We can help train you for free, and we can help you become more informed about these issues, because money is going to continue to go away. Funding is going to continue to be cut. But one way to try to reverse that or create new opportunities for our children is to get involved in public policy.
And, for a lot of people, they can't afford to give. They may not be able to donate, for example, but they can give time to something like this. And sometimes that time is as big a value as anything. And I think advocacy always sounds a little scary to people. They think, I have to be able to get up in front of people and speak. And it's really not that. It may be, if you're not comfortable doing that, that you jot a note or an email to somebody, or that you just pick up the phone and you call them. It doesn't mean that you have to go up to the State House or go to the Capitol to speak on these issues. We leave that to people like you, Marge.
Well, and you, Cal, but I mean, absolutely not. It may be that you just think, okay, maybe I should vote this year.
Yeah.
Or maybe I should just read up about it and just become more educated and aware and talk to my neighbors about this issue. Absolutely, you don't have to be a public speaker. You can just become more informed. Maybe you could just go to a school board meeting and just learn to get to know who your school board members are. And tell them, at least person to person, which is a key thing in our region, that you're interested in what they're doing around children and preschool and kindergarten. I've always said that one person's voice is incredibly powerful. And when that one person is joined by other voices, it's even more powerful. And it's just all about getting to know the issues, and we can help you with that.
So if somebody wanted to reach out to you, whether it's to get involved, just get some more information, I know they can do that through the website. Some people don't have web access. What's another way that they could really reach out just to maybe find out more about what's happening with this strategic plan, the whys, and how they could be involved?
Well, I encourage them to come and visit the Monadnock United Way offices, which is where my office is, at 23 Center Street in Keene. They can also simply call Monadnock United Way and get a hold of me that way, or they can email me at marj, M-A-R-J, at MUW.org.
So if you want to call the United Way and speak with Marge, you can call 352-4209. You can also call 211. 211 will be able to direct you to services here in the area that you may need. Marge, any last thoughts for our citizens out there who are sitting watching this and they're saying, I've raised my children, or I don't have children? What would you say to them?
I'd say it's time to get involved.
And for all of us, it's time for all of us to be involved. I want to thank you for joining us tonight. Remember, live united by giving, volunteering, advocating. Thanks for joining us.